So the client code for this will also require a few changes. So for example, in index.html, we need to add a mechanism to allow us to get the room name. So we're going to have an extra field here to take the room name. And this will be bound using knockout into a variable called room name. And then inside the chat view model, currently we call initialize when the application starts up. And this code goes away and automatically requests all the users and all the messages that are currently available. Now we don't know which users and messages are available until the user has actually joined a room. So we change the code so that we don't request users or messages until the client actually registers with a particular room. So this is the chat view model code. And the first thing we need to do here is to remove the call to initialize. Up until now, this has happened as soon as the application is started. And this is the call that goes away and pulls back the list of current users and the list of current messages. So we need to take that out and then make that call at a later point when the user actually clicks on the join button. We also need to add a variable to hold the room name, and we can do that here in the same place we create the username. And that will simply be another observable. So room name equals ko observable, and this will be initialized to the empty string. Then we need to find the join function. So the join function is called when the user clicks on the join button. And it's here that we do the work of joining to a given room. At the moment, we send a new message, just a simple join message, to tell the other listeners that a new user has joined. But now we need to change this so that first of all, we check to see if the room name has been set. And if not, the join message can't be sent. And then we're going to call initialize, passing the room name. And by doing this, we'll handle all of the joining logic in the callback from initialize. So when the WebSocket's been opened. So we've changed our chat view model's self.join method to call an initialize helper. And the helper looks like this. So in here, we're going to call the chat client initialize. So remember our helper, we're now passing the room name. And we'll pass that on to the chat client. So we'll simply pass the room name on here. And then here, we'll do as we did before. We'll save away the name the user's picked, so Alice or Bob, and we'll mark ourselves as joined to a given room. So why are we passing the room name into the initialize function? Well, the initialize function currently looks like this. Inside the chat.js file, inside initialize, we connect to the WebSocket. And the WebSocket connects to whatever the host name is plus an endpoint. And the endpoint looks like /WebSocket/chat. But if we look at our chat endpoint here, we now know that the WebSocket will look something like this. The WebSocket endpoint will look like /WebSocket/chat/room name. So when we create the endpoint here, when we connect to the endpoint, we have to append to this the name of the room we'd like to connect to. So we've changed initialize, so it now takes a room name. And then inside the connection code for the endpoint, we need to say /+ whatever the room name is. And then when we connect, we'll connect to /WebSocket/chat plus that room name. So we also need to change the onOpen event. This is called from inside chat.js. So when the socket is opened, we wire up an onOpen event handler and we pass to it a function called onOpen from our chat view model, and that's this function here. So currently, we simply call getSignedOnUsers here. So when we know the WebSocket's open, we reach out to the server and pull back the set of messages and the set of users that we care about. So previously, we sent the join message from inside the initialize function, but we can't do that anymore. It's the initialize function that opens the socket. So now at this point, we finally know the WebSocket's open. So from inside here, we also need to send the join message. So in our code, as well as calling getSignedOnUsers, we also need to call sendMessage, sending out our new join message. Notice that we don't need to specify the room name here, as the room name is encoded into the URL. So we simply send a message to the endpoint, The endpoint is identified by the full URL that contains the room name. That room name is the path parameter, and that path parameter will be passed into onOpen, and in this case into onMessage. So inside here, the room name will be sent as part of the URL. So if we run the code in the browser, we'll see we can now enter the room name and the username. If we bring up the console to see what happens. So I enter a room name of, let's say, music, and a username of Alice, and click on join. And sure enough, we seem to join, but we have a couple of issues. The first is that we get Alice back twice. And the second is that here we get some error. We're using jQuery, but the error is actually in our code. So let's fix the Alice issue first, the name issue first. So I go back into the code. If I look in chat view model and inside the onOpen method, so here what we're doing is we are sending out our join message. When we send the join message, that joins us to the current room, and then that also broadcasts out the name of the currently joined user. So Alice is broadcast back to us, and then we ask for the signed on users. So we'll get Alice again. So we simply need to reverse these two to fix that error. So now we'll get the sign on users, which won't contain us, and then we'll broadcast our name out, and we'll get ourselves in the broadcast message. So the other issue we have, if we look in the browser, is inside process message of chat view model. If we take a look at that, this is the code that receives the list of messages from the server, and then for each message in that list, adds that message to the screen. And what it's telling us is that this variable, message.messages, is null. If we look back at the code that sends these messages, that's in chat endpoint, and that's the code here. So what that's now doing is it's reaching into the dictionary based on the room name and pulling out the message list from that dictionary and then sending that back. Well, initially there are no messages, so this is returning null. In the previous version, this returned an empty list, which was processed OK. So what we need to happen here is we need to say, if there's no list, create one, add that to the dictionary, and then return either the empty list or the list that was previously in the dictionary. And we have that code here already. So if I go to my process message code here, and I realize I shouldn't be doing cut and paste programming, but in this case, for the sake of brevity, we'll copy the code from the process message into our code here, and we now have this message list that we can send back instead of reaching into the endpoint and pulling out the room. So we reach into the dictionary. If there is a message list, we send it back here. If there's not, we create one, add it to the dictionary, and then send back the empty one. So we'll need something similar for sending back the list of users. As the first time a request comes in, there may be nothing in the list. We'll do that slightly differently here. So we'll see if the dictionary contains a list. If it doesn't, then we'll send back an empty list. And if it does, we'll send back the list contained in the dictionary. So at the moment, we're still sending back the list of users that's stored inside the dictionary. So we need to change the call to send object. So rather than reach into the dictionary, to actually send back the users that we've just retrieved from the dictionary. If we now redeploy the application and run this in the browser, and again bring up the console so we can see any errors. If we enter music and Alice and click on join, then sure enough we get Alice once and we get no errors in the console window.